Hello. So, second little video on my YouTube adventure, and tonight's video is a book review. So, I won't be doing these very often, but every now and again, if I read something interesting, I think there could be a bit of benefit in sharing it. So, this is a book which I recently reread, and it's called Stealing Fire by two Californian characters. I don't know if they're academics. They certainly present themselves as being academics. Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheal, I think. And there's lots of talk about laboratories and that sort of thing. So I think they're scientists. Not that that really comes through in the book. It's an interesting book, and it's about this flow theory. So the book's primarily about flow theory, which is this sort of altered state of consciousness where you lose track of time and become completely absorbed in what you're doing, and very much positive psychology and all of that. And I like flow theory, actually, and I use it quite a bit when I'm talking about strengths, and that it's something that's worth paying attention to, because when you get into your flow state, you're doing something which you probably enjoy and that's reviving, and is probably doing you a bit of good. So this book looks at how various different people have gone about pursuing getting into this flow state. Some some by through quite extraordinary means. So it does sort of rather focus, and I think this is probably my challenge with it, is it focuses quite heavily on pretty hardcore nutters who do things like, jumping off mountains in Batman suits and all of that sort of stuff. And for many of them, it doesn't end well, and a lot of the studies are again reasonably quite extreme. So a lot of it's about, Navy SEALs, top athletes, and all that sort of stuff. And what do these people do to get into flow? Um, there's one chapter which looks at the role of hallucinogenic drugs. So that is mildly interesting. To be honest, it started to lose me a little bit at that point. Not that I'm disinterested in that. And there was a very good podcast I came across with Russell Brand and Eckhart Tolle where this came up, and I felt that they handled it better. Gets a little bit sort of bizarre and strange, and there's another chapter which I won't go into here because it's a bit rude, but I'm pretty sure that the people who feature are now on fraud charges, having effectively started a cult. So a few question marks around the legitimacy of all of this. I think my main challenge with it is that for those of us who aren't really interested in jumping off mountains in Batman suits, there is a bit of a question about how do normal people benefit from this, and there definitely is, I think, in terms of understanding this aspect of life, of being completely absorbed and in the moment and focused and present and all of that. And I think it would have been a better book if there'd been a little bit more of, you know, how so for me for example, I tend to sort of, I can lose a day very happily by pottering around in the garden, strangely by writing a little paper or an essay. If I'm doing my studies, I can get quite absorbed in that. So I think, yeah, in a way it would have been a more interesting book if it had been a little bit more down to earth and a little bit less extreme in the examples that it talks about. Nonetheless, though, I kind of recommend it. It is interesting. It came out similar time to other similar books like Angela Duckworth's book on grit, which is quite similar. And again, that's the same sort of thing. Again, it's focused on quite extreme sort of, case studies of human endurance and that sort of thing, which is no, it is interesting. But again, I just always feel that if we normal folks could relate to these things, then we might benefit a little bit more from them. Um, so in and around, an interesting read, and it covers that whole sort of flow concept. The best bit, actually, for me, whilst I'm thinking about it, I think the bit which really sort of struck a chord and I thought found most interesting was when it talks about how groups of people, how teams of people can kind of synchronize when they're in this flow state. So that was very interesting. And I suppose it's a little bit like, how you get like jazz bands or orchestras or I don't know, similar, sort of groups of musicians who come together, and if they've played together for a little while, they can sort of harmonize, and they don't necessarily need to follow music and that sort of thing. There's a sort of synchronicity that happens between people, and that's really pretty interesting, I think. So that for me was the bit that resonated. So overall, Stealing Fire, I'd give it a solid 7. Interesting book. Goes off on some strange little avenues and pathways, and but for anybody interested in positive psychology, it's worth a read. Certainly if you could find it on eBay for a couple of quid, it would be worth it. I wouldn't want to fork out and pay a tenner or whatever on Amazon, but if you could find it cheap on eBay, and you want to do a little bit of positive psychology, you could do a lot worse. There we go. That's my little YouTube leadership ramble for today, and I'll do another one in a day or two. Thank you very much.